Most often, a video game enjoys a fairly limited cultural lifespan. It comes out, is hopefully enjoyed by a handful of people, maybe talked about at the end of the year, and then slides back into the limited access part of our brains along with all the other media we've enjoyed then forgotten. Far less often, a game hits like a meteor, lands so forcefully that it clouds the sky for months, affects the ecosystem of game players and developers for years, leaves a permanent mark from which influences obviously flow. But most rarely of all, a game's initial fleeting impression hides its true cultural impact. Instead of a meteor, this type of game lands like a seed, biding its time, soaking up sun, and spreading its roots until one day, years later, you look out the window and think, "Good God, the final boss of that game really is a United States Senator!" Could I be overstating the importance of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance? Of course. But with this game, it's almost impossible to avoid hyperbole. In the near decade since Revengeance's release, few games have even approached its sheer bug-nuts energy. It's a game with a 5-hour campaign that I've played for well over 100 hours, and to my absolute delight, in the past few years, I've only seen Metal Gear Rising's influence grow, spawning new memes and references long after most games would have faded into obscurity. After all, as the game informs us, memes are the DNA of the soul. What does Revengeance mean to us now? Well, obviously it means revenge with a vengeance, anyone could tell you that, but how does it exist as a game, as a meme, as a political object? What's it like as an experience in the 2020s? Does anyone care about this game as much as me, or am I just like totally off base? Some of the highest praise I can give a game is all killer, no filler. In other words, it has only good parts. There are no dragging sections, no chapters that I dread playing. Few games earn this title. Resident Evil 4, maybe Inside. It's a hard accolade to achieve. And the thing about Metal Gear Rising is that there's actually a ton of filler. Long conversations of little value, borderline miserable VR missions. I would never argue that all of the content in this game maintains the highest level of quality. But when ripping through this thing at 1,000,000 miles an hour, skipping every cutscene, fast-forwarding through every codec call, I'd argue that Revengeance offers one of the best killer-to-filler ratios out there. Because the mechanics of the game itself, the core systems on which it's built, seem to have been designed with the express purpose of never moving less than 100 miles an hour. Let's do something I very rarely do, and actually talk about how this game plays. Revengeance could broadly be described as a spectacle fighter, a game focused on the style and acrobaticness of combat as much as raw survival. Probably the most important series in this genre is Devil May Cry, which consists of fighting through enemy encounters with a series of absurd weapons while attempting to raise an on-screen style meter as high as possible. I adore Devil May Cry, and remain in awe of its combat systems. They're immensely technical piles of mechanics, delays and cancels and air hikes. It is a surprisingly thoughtful combat system. Though the actions may be happening with a speed that implies button mashing, there's no way to achieve this kind of thing without a surprising amount of patience. It's the reason why, although I deeply respect them, I've never really felt mind-melded with the DMCs. They just take too much conscious thought. But Metal Gear Rising, although made of the same slashes, launches, and kicks as Devil May Cry, has a significantly different feel to its combat rhythms. Despite a long list of combos, Revengeance doesn't feel like it's built around specific sequences of buttons to hit. Instead, virtually every attack flows into every other, accommodating a more button-mashy style, but also making Raiden feel like his attacks are almost liquid, delivering an unbroken string of impossibly elegant maneuvers. Unlike Devil May Cry, I almost never feel like I've dropped a combo in Metal Gear Rising. Instead, its controls encourage you to never ease up, never stop attacking. Because the challenge of the game's combat system isn't executing difficult combinations of button presses, it's holding on to that flow while simultaneously dealing with the punctuation of enemies' attacks. And once again, Revengeance takes the concept of avoiding damage, looks at it, and asks, how can we design this so the player never slows down for even a second? Avoiding incoming damage is a surprisingly big hurdle in your early time with Revengeance. Dodging is an optional skill that has to be unlocked, and there's no discrete block button. Instead, the game tells you that the only consistent defense is relentless offense. The way to avoid an enemy's attack is to push towards them and throw out a well-timed attack of your own. I'm not embellishing this, the block button is truly the same as the attack button. And this is easier than it sounds, the timing is pretty generous, but the end result, doing away with all blocking and shielding and the like, is that the combat system is almost unbelievably aggressive. Not only do you never stop attacking, your light and heavy attacks melding into one unbroken flow, but your primary defense is offense, never even taking your fingers off the throttle. And since parrying an enemy requires moving towards them, retreat is made near impossible. If you want to defend yourself, you have to be right up in an enemy's face. The parry can come out at virtually any time, interrupting any other attack, meaning that there's no reason to ever take a breath, no commitment to swings like in a weightier game. There's even an ultra-powerful counter hit that only triggers if you parry within a couple frames of an attack, further incentivizing playing on an absolute razor's edge. Really, the only action that doesn't involve actively attacking is moving from one enemy to the other, and even this has been tweaked for maximum kinetic energy. Raiden's Ninja Run is a sprint that moves at freeway speeds, deflects bullets, and automatically vaults obstacles. There is virtually no reason to move in any other way. In fact, sprinting full tilt towards an enemy is typically the best way to avoid damage. It makes the tempo of combat absolutely frenetic, and I would say breathless, but in fact, it accounts for that, because Revengeance also introduced the world to Zandatsu, and we're all better for it. The real hook of the combat, as promised in the game's first reveal trailer, is that any enemy sufficiently weakened can be sliced and diced in any direction, and when you hit the proper spot, you can reach out, pull out the enemy's spine, crush it in your hands, and regain all your health and energy. This is Doom's glory kills amped up to 11, the utmost aggression rewarded with complete power, zero incentive to ever retreat. It means that the enemy's aggression can be scaled up, because each opponent is an opportunity to bring yourself back to 100%. Tough fights with multiple enemies have you constantly rocketing between almost dead and fully empowered. There's rarely a situation that feels unsalvageable. And the Zandatsu itself, I must say, is one of the all-time great pieces of video game animation and sound design. The immediacy that you can interrupt your slicing to start the animation, the directness of Raiden's outstretched arm or the spiraling of his jump, the punch in of the camera as you crush the spine and shower yourself with, I don't know, Powerade. It is long enough to take exactly one breath in the middle of fighting. I have likely seen this animation over 10,000 times, and I never get tired of it. The cherry on top is if you manage to slice multiple enemies in exactly the right spot in a single motion, you will reach out and grab each spine individually before crushing the entire fistful at once. An aside, Metal Gear Rising, along with most other Platinum games, have the absolute best approach to difficulty settings, and I just need to talk about it for a second. There are no fewer than 5 difficulty modes in this game. Easy, normal, hard, very hard, and Revengeance. Not only do these make the game accessible for folks of all skill levels, but they also serve as a sort of meta guide for your progression. Very hard is only unlocked by beating hard, Revengeance is only unlocked by beating very hard, so that's at least 3 clears of the game to unlock everything, probably more. But repeated clears never feel like work, because you keep all your gear and moveset between difficulties, meaning that very hard can build its challenge around the idea that you've already beat everything and gained all possible advantages. It even swaps around enemy arrangements, which improves high difficulty levels in virtually every game. Finally, the 2 hardest difficulty levels aren't a simple escalation, but offer substantially different takes on difficulty. Very Hard is a more traditional highest difficulty, with tricky arrangements of enemies and boosted health pools. It's the option I play on when I just want to have a fun, challenging time with the game. Revengeance difficulty instead cranks up the deadliness of everything to the breaking point. In this mode, most enemies will KO you in a single hit, but your perfect parry is just as powerful, capable of shattering bosses in seconds. It's a mode that takes absolute concentration, but man, does it feel good to win. Also, I just thought of this, but is it weird that I'm similarly obsessed with two games from the same generation that both have strategic dismemberment as a feature? Don't answer that. We're going back to the essay. It's a credit to the sublime flow of battle, the incredible inertia built around the combat system, that the massive mechanical holes in the game can't do much to bring it down. Most obvious are the sub-weapons, additions to your katana that you pick up throughout the game. The movesets of these things are beautiful, the potential of their versatility is near limitless, but to switch to them, you have to fully stop moving, slowly pause the game, move through a menu, and equip one, an action that both kills the flow and removes your standard heavy attacks. It's a baffling decision for a game that barely uses the D-pad otherwise, and it means that I use these sub-weapons far less than I should. The same goes for the game's wide array of near-meaningless gadgets, handfuls of grenades and rocket launchers and sneaking tools, all of which are so unwieldy and limited in their purpose that my inventory remains largely unused through entire playthroughs. There's also a half-hearted suggestion at stealth in several sections, but not only are you incredibly limited in your sneaking ability, the idea of stealth in this game goes against virtually every principle of the combat. Although, it is admittedly hilarious to sprint up behind someone and slice them in half as a quiet way of taking them out. There are a number of systems, even more evident in the game's frustrating VR missions, that feel like vestigial holdovers from a different version of Revengeance. And this makes sense, because there absolutely was a different version of Revengeance. Platinum, the developer of this game, are also responsible for Bayonetta and Wonderful 101 and many other of the best parts of this world. However, the original idea of this game didn't involve Platinum. It was an in-house project by Kojima Productions, the same folks that made, Metal Gear Solid. It was, according to Kojima himself, a game for folks at the studio to practice on before jumping into Metal Gear Solid 5. But after years of stalled progress, they just couldn't crack it, and so they handed it off to Platinum, who produced the divine object we've been talking about. The game didn't escape this development hell unscathed. There are definite negative holdovers, like the superfluous stealth system and the clunky menus, but I would never say the unexpected collaboration between the two studios was a net negative, because without it, we likely never would have got If you know one thing about Metal Gear Rising, it's probably a moment from the very first level. Just minutes after first taking control of Raiden, the game presents you with a boss, Metal Gear Ray, an enormous mech designed to kill other enormous mechs, a creation so imposing it's one of the series' namesakes, a machine that was arguably the non-human antagonist of an entire game. And then, in the first level of Revengeance, you take on the machine with a sword, counter its office building-sized strike, hurl the entire thing over your shoulder, and then sprint up its flying chassis, slicing it apart like a wire through soft cheese. It is an absurd power escalation, essentially leveling up Raiden to the single most capable being in the Metal Gear universe, and yet somehow I'm still leaving out the most memorable part of the sequence. Because it's not just that Raiden cleaves a series-defining boss in two, it's not just that he blocks that sword with this one, it's that when he does, the moment the two connect, the instrumental rock track scoring the whole thing suddenly gains lyrics and the singer screams, the moment so goddamn elevated that mere instruments can't contain it anymore. It's not the only time the game does this. In fact, every boss has their own song with narratively appropriate lyrics. But the first time is a mission statement, a declaration of intent. It's saying that the previous extremes are the new baseline. Also, as another important side note, the fact that Metal Gear Rising quite literally breaks into song whenever emotion reaches a breaking point means that it is, by definition, a musical. That's all. I do want to make clear that it's not like previous Metal Gear games were normal or reserved to any extent. Raiden himself has experienced a medium-defining existential freakout. He's held back a city-sized submarine with one arm. He's fought a vampire. The difference between these moments and the ones in Revengeance aren't necessarily their substance, but their execution. Kojima's Metal Gear is laden with so much exposition that it feels grounded by the sheer weight of its in-universe technobabble. The original plan for Metal Gear Rising, when it was a Kojima Productions game, was to place it in the time between Metal Gear Solid 2 and 4, limiting its scope by cementing it in a known time span. Platinum's Metal Gear, although still largely written by Etsu Tamari of Koji Pro, is instead unburdened by all of this, set chronologically after the last game in the main franchise. It's free to explain as much or little as it wants to escalate every conflict to mythic proportions. It retains the spirit of the franchise, discussing the issues of war and society with characters who are metaphors of those very issues, but heightens those discussions as much as it does the combat. The results are as silly as they are undeniably effective. AI wolves with chainsaws for tails discussing philosophy, magnetic men sliding apart to avoid your strikes while lecturing you on memes, a human shield who traffics child soldiers yelling, "I'm f***ing invincible!" as you hack him up. The most wonderful point of dissonance comes at the end of each boss fight, as you first reduce an enemy to human confetti, and then receive a codec call from them where they give you some parting words. It's funny every single time. An interesting paradox of Revengeance's unsubtleness is its relation to the real world, our world. Though Metal Gear Solid has always been an overtly political series, the events of its games often walked a line between historical and allegorical. The closer the series got to the modern day, the less real-life events were acknowledged. Metal Gear Rising, though more fantastical than any game in the Solid series, throws all that allegory trash out the window. Revengeance knows writers who use subtext and they're all cowards. A leader of a private military army gleefully exclaims that they're returning to a time
like the good old days after 9/11.
When Raiden discovers that he's been part of a false flag attack to motivate a new war, he says that
the media and the public won't be able to resist. Remember WMDs in Iraq?
I don't want to overstate the game's insight. There's little commentary here that hadn't already been said elsewhere, but it's absolutely fascinating that smashing together Metal Gear Solid's themes and Platinum's radical directness resulted in one of the most blatantly political AAA games I can think of, a title absolutely consumed with the legacy of America's 21st century administrations and their never-ending occupations. And that's without even mentioning perhaps the most important part of the game, what will certainly keep it locked in my brain forever, the simple fact that the final boss is a United States Senator. It's hard to ignore that. The final boss of Metal Gear Rising Revengeance is a United States Senator. Let's back up for a second and talk about memes. Metal Gear Solid is perhaps one of the last pieces of mainstream media to use meme with its originally intended usage, not referencing an internet joke, but the actual anthropological concept, an idea that replicates and spreads through culture as genes do in biology. Some of Metal Gear Solid's most prominent ideas center around the concept of memes. Kojima even declared it the major theme of Metal Gear Solid 2. The end of that game is shockingly prophetic, even today. It predicts a future in which truth will still exist, but be drowned in endless trivial information. Societal behavior will be sculpted by this uncontrollable flow, and the flow itself will be directed by AI. 10 years pass between that prediction and Revengeance's release. Reality itself nears the science fiction promised at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2. And in turn, Revengeance takes 2's concept of memes and strips all that pesky nuance away. Halfway through the game, a boss made of magnets victoriously declares,
"Free will is a myth. Religion is a joke. We're all pawns, controlled by something greater. Memes. The DNA of the soul.
This monologue, I must remind you, is supposed to be on the original definition of memes, not our new definition, and yet, in a turn both eminently predictable and absolutely fitting, Metal Gear Rising is an absolute neo-meme juggernaut. Turn anywhere on the internet and you'll find repurposed pieces of Revengeance. Its monologues have been turned to copy pastas, its music used as punchlines, its dialogue repeated ad nauseum and slapped in impact font onto every picture imaginable. At this point in time, the common internet definition of meme has totally supplanted its anthropological origins, and yet it also exemplifies them. Our stupid repeated pieces of content shape the culture, passed from one person to another like a worldwide shared genetic lineage. And Revengeance embodies this irony. The memes of this game are everywhere, unstoppable. The original holistic image of the game only exists for a handful, and yet Revengeance is immortal, preserved by these fragments, survived by its memes. How could it not? This is a game in which you fight a chainsaw robot wolf, a lady with 1,000 arms, a cyber samurai, but somehow culminates in an hour-long battle against a United States senator, a white guy in a business suit who smokes a cigar and boasts that he played football in college.
Don't fuck with this, Senator!
A politician whose only explanation for his near invincibility is the phrase,
"Nanomachine, son!"
A fictional US senator who, in 2013, shouts,
"Make America great again!"
The memic density of this fight is unprecedented, the sheer volume of ideology and imagery almost impossible to take in. Before you fight the man, you first have to fight his machine. It's a Metal Gear called Excelsis. It is far more massive than any other scene in the series, built not to pressure countries with distant nuclear launches, but to raze entire cities to the ground in person, establish absolute dominance through sheer overwhelming spectacle. It is, in short, the perfect analogy for Revengeance as a whole. Every piece of subtext is cut away. To destroy the mech, you use one of its own arms to slice it to pieces, an action that could be the perfect mechanical conclusion of the game, and yet it keeps going. The senator pummels you with fists and unhinged dogma. He claims that war will benefit the American people. He says, no joke, that he has a dream. It is, for all the absurd spectacle, grossly familiar. But Metal Gear Rising is not a game that limits itself to the rules of our political reality, because the single most fantastical, most intoxicating moment of the fight, the part our reality can only dream of, is when he finally goes mask off. Because the senator admits, actually says out loud, that his ultimate goal is to burn every American support system to the ground. That what he wants to do, above war, above economics, above party, is simply push the country into a state of true primal cruelty. That his America is one without kindness or compassion, where mass preventable suffering would indeed serve as proof of some animalistic definition of freedom. It is the same ideology that seems to lurk behind countless real politicians' lips, one implicit in the new policies we all see every day. It often seems like the driving force behind our entire political machine, and yet it's something they will never, never admit. But here, in Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, a game without subtlety, a game without breaks, a game that hasn't stopped accelerating from the word go, the hulking nanomachine-fueled United States Senator finally just says it. And then you rip out his fucking heart. I have a pretty firm rule that a video shouldn't attempt to be about everything in a game. These things are simply too big. There are too many aspects to attempt any kind of comprehensive coverage. But with a game like Revengeance, it's a little frustrating to know that I'll always be leaving some of my favorite elements of the game on the cutting room floor. Fortunately, This video is sponsored by Nebula and CuriosityStream, and Nebula gives me the chance to keep talking about this game I love so much. One of the resources I used to write this essay is a book on Metal Gear Rising, yes, it actually exists, called Rules of Nature, a book authored by one of my favorite games writers named Harper J. McIntyre. I've already quoted her in at least one other video. And so I called up Harper and we talked for almost an hour about even more Revengeance.
Let's accept two truths about video games. They're beautiful, they're also f***ing stupid.
What am I missing? What are your critiques?
I think you discount the Kodak conversations. Any game involving the character of Raiden is a study in self-delusion and authenticity.
Nebula has increasingly become the home for this sort of thing from me, videos I love making and want to put somewhere, but wouldn't really fit on this platform, content algorithms being what they are. Signing up for Nebula means you'll get all these extra vids, which is hours of content at this point, and you'll see my videos a little early, and you'll get access to CuriosityStream. All this for less than 15 bucks for an entire year at curiositystream.com/Jacob Geller. Unfortunately, typing Revengeance into CuriosityStream doesn't get many results, but despite that, this other half of the bundle has tons of stuff viewers of this channel will probably be interested in. Superstructures, space, even nanomachines. It's kind of an unbeatable deal at this point. If you want to see Harper and I wax poetic about Revengeance for even longer, you know what to do. Get a whole year of this kind of content for less than $15 by going to curiositystream.com/Jacob Geller.